Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow.
I would not trade speaking, writing, living my conscience for any high-paying job pressuring me to shut up my conscience, my convictions. I would not trade living below the federal income taxable level to refuse to pay for U.S. mass murder in many nations. I would not trade refusing to pay for war for all the money in the world. I would not trade mostly walking, often riding the bus, for owning a luxury car, even if it were given to me free and if I were paid to drive it. I would not trade sunbathing many days in cool weather on my backyard small private Riviera beach for a free trip anywhere on earth. I would not trade my main food every day, my homemade, raw, blended smoothies with many, about 20 or so ingredients, for the highest priced restaurant meal in this city. I would not trade going to bed most nights between 9 and 10 and getting up around 6 a.m. for late night parties and getting up late. I would not trade my garden for food and flowers. I would not trade that garden for fancy furniture in any mall. I would not trade my 9.5 by 12-foot one-room home, 114 square feet, 6 windows, marvelous sunshine, for living free in a huge mansion. I would not trade the precious wisdom many people have taught me about living simply, living healthy, living compassionately. I would not trade that precious wisdom they've given me for all the diamonds in this world. I was strongly attracted to my dear friend Daniel in his 20s. He knew I am gay. He knew I was attracted to him. And one day he called me into the room where he was sitting. He had a magnificent, naked hard-on. He was offering himself to me for sex. But I did not have sex with him. Later, I explained to him why I did not have sex with him. I told him I was very attracted to him, but I knew how changeable he was. I did not want him feeling ashamed and guilty after having sex with me. I did not want him to feel bad toward me as his friend. I did not want him to feel bad about himself and about sex with me. Sadly, many men feel ashamed and guilty after they orgasm and come in sex with a man. I want any male friend I have sex with to feel good afterward about himself, about me, and about our sex together. a special good memory. I'm very glad to have sex with any single, healthy man who is attracted to me and to whom I'm attracted, if he has no shame, no guilt about making love with men. Nine-year-old Billy goes to Sunday school. His sincere, kind teacher, Mary, loves all the children in her class. And this Sunday, Mary teaches Jesus' words from the Bible. Whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. Billy's dad is alcoholic. Billy's dad beats and curses Billy's mother most nights. But this Sunday night, Billy's dad is especially crazy and mean. He pulls out a gun, threatening Billy's mother. Billy prays with all his heart, prays desperately. Dear God, stop my drunk dad from killing my mother. I believe you can, God. But minutes later, Billy screams when Billy's dad shoots Billy's mother in her head and kills her. Does Billy ever again believe what his kind, sincere teacher, Mary, says about God and Jesus? Does Billy ever again go back to Sunday school? Does his teacher Mary, when she hears about this awful tragedy, still believe the verse she taught that Sunday? Does Mary eventually stop believing in God herself as a loving, all-powerful parent God who helps all those who desperately pray for help? Does Mary slowly come to see that much of religion, not just the Bible and not just Christianity, much of religion is feel-good, make-believe bullshit? Sadly, I, Don Schrader, swallowed and spread false advertising for God for many years. If Jesus actually lived, and if Jesus taught that God is a loving, all-powerful parent God who will help all who pray for help in desperate situations, Jesus was sadly deluded about God, about reality. And no matter how well-meaning, no matter how sincere Jesus was, it just ain't true. Hundreds of millions of people for thousands of years have prayed desperately for help from war, starvation, cancer, addiction, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, rape, family violence, and received no help. I wish we had a fair, loving, all-powerful parent God who helped all people who fervently prayed for help. I wish that. But wishing doesn't make it so. I wish that after death, we would all be together again with our loved ones in a much better world. but I refuse to swallow feel-good, make-believe bullshit. I don't know what happens, if anything, after death to any of us. After my mother Lillian died in 1982, 40 years ago, my dad became in some ways the living person closest to me. In spite of our many arguments and conflicts and fights with words, my dad died 28 years ago in 1994. He was 81. My dad was a foster child. How did he find out he was a foster child and that the mother and dad raising him were not his birth parents? A kid in school told him. And what a shock it must have been for my dad. And if he was a baby for a while in an orphanage before his foster parents took him in, he probably starved for hugs in that orphanage, starved for tender touch. For many years, I think he wondered who his birth parents were and why they did not keep him, and if he had sisters and brothers that he had never met. And many years later, I tried to find out some of this, but no luck. My dad quit school after 8th grade, began working hard on farms. My dad did not go to high school, but he wanted me to have both high school and college. I got good grades in college, but I dropped out. I got bored. I prefer learning in the University of Life. And maybe as a foster child, my dad felt he had to work extra hard to show he was worth keeping. My dad was in his 20s during the Great Depression. He started his business buying and selling cattle and hogs in the 1940s. My now 87-year-old brother and some of his family still run that business in Illinois, the oldest cattle and hog market in that county. And at his business, my dad was very much in charge, the boss. But in other places, he often was shy and quiet. My dad, sadly, was a workaholic. My mother spent a lot of money buying small stuff no one needs, and she later regretted buying so much stuff. My dad never learned to enjoy music and to read many books. My dad was addicted to work, long hours. The marriage of him and my mother was miserable for both of them. At least once, when mother and dad were fighting, I was afraid he would kill her. And I'm so glad they were not boozers and no gun was in our house. After my mother died, my dad dated my mother's sister Susie for 12 years until he died. Susie's husband had died many years before. Dad enjoyed going with her to many places in that area. He and my mother suffered emotional war much of their marriage, but it was much different dating Susie. My dad and Susie each had their own home, their own money. Susie was a strict conservative Baptist. They never got married. They never had sex, but they enjoyed many times together. She was lean. My mother had gotten very fat. She enjoyed dressing up. She never got fat. She never suffered awful sickness as my mother did. My dad liked my mustache. He did not like my long hair or my beard that I used to have. And back then, I often wore dark or black clothes. He did not like me wearing. He thought dark clothes were for old people. And now, when I'm much older, I wear a lot of bright colors. Back then, I often went to bed late, felt like shit the next day. I wish I could tell him now that I go to bed early. Then I very foolishly drove cars and trucks, sleepy many times, risking my life, risking the lives of other people. Very foolish. Learn from my mistake. Never drive sleepy. I stopped all driving many years ago. I've become an expert in saving money. I enjoy living simply below the U.S. poverty level. There's so much I wish I could tell both mother and dad now. I apologize for keeping him awake with music. It was good music, beautiful music, but it kept him awake many nights there on the farm. I kept him awake many nights talking with friends who were visiting me there. My dad was afraid about my being arrested in protests in Washington, D.C., New York City, Omaha, Nebraska. I aim to speak, write, and live the truth, but now I aim not to get arrested in protest. I never drank much booze, but I have drunk no booze, not one damn drop of that slow poison at all for many years. Booze is slow poison to every single cell of the body. And when I worked part-time in my dad's business, he and I often rode together in his trucks. He drove part of the time, I drove part of the time. I wish he had asked me many questions about my life, my feelings. But much of the time, as he and I rode together, there was no conversation. I love personal questions. In 1986, when my boyfriend David from Michigan visited me on the farm, my dad took a photo of him and me together. And years later, when David and I were no longer in touch, and I was feeling down that day, my dad encouraged me to phone David. When Mother and Dad were living, I lived part-time with them on the farm in Illinois and part-time here in New Mexico. I had a taste, a small taste of what many immigrants feel, having your heart torn between two homes hundreds of miles apart. For me, it was about 1,300 miles between our farm in Illinois and here. And one night there on the farm, years after my mother had died, my dad and I had an especially awful argument. My room was upstairs in the old farmhouse. He slept downstairs. And that night, I felt hell emotionally. I felt I could no longer cope living there with him. But the next morning, on his own, my dad apologized to me. His apology helped me so much. And when I was here in New Mexico, I wrote him many letters. And he saved those letters together in a drawer that I found later there on the farm. My dad suffered asthma for over 40 years. He often sat up at night to sleep because with his asthma he couldn't lie down for part of the night. He suffered heart trouble 15 years. He suffered many headaches. But he faithfully mailed me manila envelopes, large manila envelopes, over 200 times, sending me my mail that came there, articles from his newspaper, and a check. My dad suffered a colostomy, a hole in his side for his shit to come out in a bag he wore. Colostomies are hell. Fortunately, he did not have cancer of the colon, so his intestine was connected again after a year. My dad was in hospitals many times. My Aunt Susie, the conservative Baptist, my mother's sister, loved me. But sadly, she never fully accepted my being gay. Dad felt much pressure from her, from my very religious only brother, against my being gay. My dad had never known any openly gay person before me. And once when I was working at his business, a young, very good-looking, shirt-free farmer came. And after this man left, I told my dad I would love to fuck with him. And my dad said, "You better not let your brother hear that." I think I told my dad then that sometimes the person who seems strong against gays is fighting their own gay feelings inside. And often when I was living there, when I would leave the house in the evenings to go someplace, I would kiss my dad as he sat stiff like a statue in his chair. January 8th, 1994, when I left to come back to Albuquerque after he had been sick and hospitalized and had come back home and had seemed to be doing better. I told my dad that day to initiate, to take the first step in kissing me when my nephew, David, my brother's second son, would come up there to the farm to pick me up, to drive me to town, to catch the bus. I wanted David to see Dad making the first move to kiss me. I wonder if David remembers that 28 years later. And sadly, that was the last time, January 8th, 1994, that I saw my dad alive. Years earlier, Dad's last long trip that he ever took was to visit me here in Albuquerque. When I was there, many of my friends visited me on the farm. My dear friend Daniel from Albuquerque, my dear friend Raul and his wife Dora, who lived in Chicago at that time, and many, many more. Dad was concerned for my safety, and often he went in with the huge, dangerous hogs. Some could weigh 400, 500, 600 pounds, and told me to stand outside the truck's back door. Dad wanted to be on time for things, not late. And I aimed to be on time. My dad wanted to fix right away something broken at the business, a nail sticking out of a board or a board broken or whatever. He wanted to fix those things right away. He liked to get his mail at the small village post office. He liked Western shirts with snaps. And so do I, when it's cold enough for me to wear a shirt. Dad complimented me many times on work I did on our farm and in the business. Once, after I published a letter in the newspaper there against eating meat, and remember, my dad's business was cattle and hogs, an upset farmer spoke to my dad. And when Dad told me, I said, if that happens again, tell the person, my mother taught me to stand up for what I believe. Dad found it easier to talk about his asthma than his buried fears, his buried feelings. Easier to talk about his headaches and his chest pains than his heartaches. Dad found it easier, like millions of men, to talk about his broken bones than our broken family. And during his last almost 6 years before he died, after I returned in 1988 to live in Albuquerque, he and I phoned each other hundreds of times. If I lived to be 81, the age he was when he died, I hope I work as hard in my work as he still did in his work. When Dad was in the hospital his last December, weeks before I returned to Albuquerque, I was there. He asked me to trim his toenails there in the hospital, and I did. He told me to bring his corn popper to the hospital from home. I did. He popped corn and he feasted. As he lay in agony the day before he died, my dad told my Aunt Susie, "Now I know what Lillian, his wife, my mother, went through. When we're up and around doing things, going places, we do not know what it's like to suffer like this." I, Don Schrader, am deeply indebted to both my mother and my dad, and I dedicate this program today to both of them. Every one of us is capable of terrifying violence. Every one of us is capable of murder in a moment of insane rage. And every one of us is also capable of marvelous compassion and of wonderful good. We need to always see and recognize the evil within us and around us, but we need to concentrate mainly on the good around us and within us. It's better, far better, to light a candle than to curse the darkness. Violence is a terrible human problem. It's not just a male problem. Violence is a terrible problem of both men and women. And no one is born evil. Not Hitler, not Trump, not me, not you, not anybody. No one is born evil. If we think of persons who have hurt us the most, and if we think of persons who have committed huge, bloody atrocities, if I had suffered the childhoods they suffered, if I had suffered the poison influence they later suffered after childhood, if I had not had the many, many people who have taught me, who have loved me, who have inspired me, I might have committed the same evils they committed. With much help from each other, we can wake up. We can turn from evil. We can turn to good. The words of the prophet Martin Luther King Jr., April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year before he was assassinated. This prophet, Martin Luther King Jr., says, "My experience in the ghettos of the North, as I've walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails, rifles, would not solve their problems. I've tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through non-violent action." But they asked, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They asked if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the changes it wanted. And their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. The nations of this world are engaged in a bitter, colossal contest for supremacy. I'm sad to say that the nation in which we live is a supreme culprit. God didn't call America to engage in a senseless, unjust war as a war in Vietnam. We're criminals in that war. We're called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for victims of our nation, and for those it calls enemy. So far, we may have killed 1 million of them, mostly children. What do they think of as we test our latest weapons on them? Just as the Germans tested out new tortures in the concentration camps of Europe. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped, psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. Prophet Martin Luther King Jr. also said, I definitely feel that the development and use of nuclear weapons, hear this, Sandia Weapons Lab, Los Alamos Weapons Lab, all the people who work there, do business there. It cannot be disputed that a full-scale nuclear war would be utterly catastrophic. Hundreds of millions of people would be killed outright by the blast and heat, and by the ionizing radiation produced at the instant of the explosion. Even countries not directly hit by bombs would suffer through global fallouts. All of this, the Prophet Martin Luther King Jr. says, leads me to say that the principal objective of all nations must be the total abolition of war. War must be finally eliminated, or the whole of mankind will be plunged into the abyss of annihilation. Do we believe it? We all will die. By living healthy in every way, every day, we can greatly improve our chances of a long, healthy life until the day we die. But accidents happen, violence happens. Tomorrow is not guaranteed to anyone on earth. Sooner or later, we all die. And refusing to think about death does not make death go away. Refusing to talk about death does not make death go away. Refusing to prepare for death does not make death go away. We need to put one or more persons whom we trust, persons who are close to us, in charge of making decisions for our care when we can no longer make those decisions, when we're dying. We need to tell them clearly what kind of medical treatment we want, what kind of medical treatment we do not want, when we're dying? How comfortable we want to be when we're dying? How we want people to treat us when we're dying? And what we want our loved ones to know when we're dying. 5 wishes. I highly recommend this. It's so simple, so clear, so direct. It's been translated into 30 languages. Millions and millions and millions of people have used it across the world. I filled out my copy, this copy, in 2018, 4 years ago. It's a legal document for anyone 18 years and older in New Mexico and in most states when it is signed, witnessed, and dated. And to get it from the internet, go to 5wishes.org. 5wishes.org. Fill it out. Make sure your persons in charge know where you keep it, the original. And then give them a filled out photocopy for them to keep. Millions of people have used 5 wishes. If you're close to death, if you're in a coma, not expected to recover, if you have permanent and severe brain damage, do you want life support treatment? I don't. How and where do you prefer to die? In a hospital or at home? I want to die at home. Do you want your doctor to give you medicine to relieve your pain, even if that means you will be drowsy or sleep more than you would without that medicine? Do you want certain people with you when you die? Do you want your friends, your family, and others to forgive you for when you have hurt them? Do you want family, friends, and others to know that you forgive them for when they have hurt you? Do you want all your family to make peace with each other before you die, if they can? Do you want everyone involved to respect your wishes, even if they do not agree with your wishes? Do you want to be cremated or buried or donate your body to a medical school? Where do you want your body or your ashes or your whatever remains from the medical school buried? How do you want to be remembered? Do you want to donate body organs? Or, as I was mentioning, your whole body to science? What songs, what readings, what message do you want persons speaking at your memorial service? Religious or not religious? For me, not religious. Do you want money contributions to go to a special cause or organization? Many important questions. Let your loved ones know for sure exactly what you want when you die. And if you're still alive 5 years from now, 25 years from now, 50 years from now or more, and you change your mind once or many times during those years, just fill out a new 5 wishes and throw away the old ones. Adults, if you give kids candy, do you realize sugar is the gateway drug to fat bodies, the gateway drug to diabetes? Sugar is the gateway drug to alcoholism and other drug addiction. Adults, do you realize giving kids candy or other crap, shit, sweets on Halloween or Christmas or any time is wrong? Absolutely wrong. No matter how much they want it or beg for it, no matter how much they expect it. And of course, they'll take it a little better coming from you if you walk your talk, if they never see you eating any sweet shit. Give them ripe, fresh fruit instead. My sweets are healthy, ripe fruit, and I eat a lot of fruit. Imagine the lean, good-looking boy or girl, 40 or 50 years from now, going 3 times a week, 4 hours at a time for dialysis, as my dear friend Richard in Cheyenne, Wyoming, has done for going on 4 years. 3 times a week, 4 hours a time, needles and pain. Dialysis because of kidney disease. My mother died of kidney disease. And kidney disease often comes from diabetes because of unhealthy, deadly, sweet shit. Do you care about what's going to happen to those kids 40 or 50 years from now after you may long be gone? If you give a damn about those kids, will you play roulette with their future health by feeding them anything containing added sugar or artificial sweeteners? Any other factory fake fast food? It's slow poison. Diabetes is an epidemic in this country, causing blindness, strokes, resulting in paralysis. Diabetes often results in chopping off the toes, the feet, even whole legs of those people with diabetes. The gateway drug sugar sets up millions from infancy on to become alcoholics. Our example as adults every day, if we live and eat healthy, can help many youth avoid the misery of suffering sickness. Most sickness can be prevented. Why? Why in the hell suffer? I drink no booze. Booze lowers the sex hormone testosterone. Booze makes fat potbellies. I drink no booze. Booze is high in calories, low in nutrients. The greed-driven booze companies with no conscience prey on people's chemical and emotional weaknesses, regardless of the massive harm their drinkers suffer. I refuse booze. I drink not one damn drop. I do not need booze to relax. I do not want to make it easier for me to say and do things I later regret, to commit violence against others. I do not need booze to meet and connect with people. I do not need booze to get out and dance freely in front of hundreds of people. I have no brain cells to kill. Booze destroys brain cells. I have no money to waste. Imagine if all the money people in this world spend on booze and other drugs were given instead to help millions of hungry, homeless, sick children worldwide. And even if I would never get drunk, and even if I would never become an alcoholic, I do not want someone chemically or emotionally at risk of alcoholism to use my social drinking as an excuse for them to drink booze. So I drink no booze. The soil used to grow grain and grapes to make booze could be used instead to grow plant foods for hungry people to eat, for millions of hungry people to eat. I want to be as healthy as I can, as long as I can, as close to the day I die. So I drink no booze. Drinking even some booze makes people less healthy. Booze is a depressant. So if you're already depressed, why in the hell drink booze to make you more depressed? Booze is slow poison to every single cell of the body. I love to see mountains. I love to see beautiful flowers. I love to see gorgeous sunsets. I love to see the naked bodies of lean, healthy, physically fit men, brown men, black men, native men, Asian men, white men, men who have no shame about their naked body. On one wall of my one-room home where I live, I have many photos of attractive naked men. And some of them in those photos enjoying each other's bodies, fucking and sucking each other. The first place I enjoyed mixed public nudity, naked men and women together in public, was at the Spence Hot Springs in the Jemez Mountains. Of New Mexico. The year was 1972. 50 years ago. I was 26. I'm now 76. I fell in love with being naked in public with other people. I went to that hot springs dozens of times in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. I have a photo of the official federal government sign in the parking lot back then saying bathing suits not required Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, bathing suits required Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It was a compromise solution for those who enjoy being naked and for those who do not enjoy being around naked people. And people came to that hot springs from many states, other nations. And sadly, that official federal government sign was removed years ago. I've heard that people can be arrested there now for being naked. I've not been at the Spence Hot Springs for over 21 years because I've ridden in no car since April 7th, 2001, over 21 years ago. And that place is the main place, the Spence Hot Springs in the Jemez Mountains, the main place I miss since I no longer ride in cars. And no bus runs close to the springs with good connections. But if I were there, I would want to be naked, and I do not want to get arrested for being naked. So my not being there is easier to accept. So for 50 years, since 1972, I've been an enthusiastic nudist. As far as I know, for many years, Albuquerque's most well-known nudist. I have photos my mother took of me as an adult, naked. I was often naked as an adult in the presence of my mother and my father. And for many years, I posed naked for hundreds of artists in Illinois, Santa Fe, at UNM, and other places in Albuquerque. I would be ashamed as hell to have photos on my wall of soldiers in uniform with guns, or of boxers bruising and injuring each other, or photos on my wall of football players brain damaging each other. I would be ashamed as hell to have photos like that on my wall in my room. But I am glad to have photos of naked, attractive men on my wall, fucking and sucking, giving and receiving pleasure instead of pain and bruises and violence. Thank you for watching tonight. And please, if you see me on the street and you want to talk, stop and talk. I love personal questions. To your health, my fresh piss. Good night.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said